We recently took a trip to Marzocco headquarters in Seattle to check out the new Swan grinder and the Strata X. Companies drop new products all the time, and I generally don't care. I'm not interested in doing product reviews on this channel, and I'm not interested in making gear recommendations on this channel. My reasons for going have more to do with how I view La Marzocco as a company and the evolution of the Swan grinder. So this isn't a review, it's more of an overview. Slide this whole table over, we'll slide that to the window. I visited La Marzocco a handful of times over the years, and it's always a treat to peek behind the curtain there, going into the warehouse and seeing espresso machines stacked from floor to ceiling. The little bench where they do modifications on machines and make sure everything's working correctly. The parts room, all these boilers. It's like you could pick out everything and build an espresso machine from hand, and that's just kind of magical to me. Estelle, can I make myself a cappuccino? Is that okay? Sweet. It's a nice steam wand. Love new steam wands. Life finds a way. So the Swan is the evolution of a grinder that's been in the works for more than a decade now. I think I saw the first working prototype of what was then dubbed the S grinder at SCA sometime around 2008. A lot has changed, but some of the core ideas have remained the same. Essentially, you've got a belt-driven, gigantic conical burr set, static-free, direct drop, zero retention grinder. The belt drive separates the motor from the burr set and prevents heat from creeping in through the motor shaft. So in this motor, the belt drives the outer burr instead of what usually happens in something like a row burr, where you've got the inner burr directly connected to the motor underneath it, and the motor spins that inner burr. Burrs are 83 millimeters, same size as the 3-phase row burr. I'm not sure if this is the same burr set or not. Adjustment is made with a worm drive. It is stepped, so it's got a little click to it, but the adjustment range is huge. You got to turn it a lot to make your adjustment, which is good. You want as much adjustment as possible. And the knob for the adjustment on the grinder is on both sides, so you can turn it from the left or the right, which is good if you're wearing ridiculously large watches like I am, or you've got grinders stacked together in a tight space. The menu is really simple. It gives you 2 options for pre-programmed doses, and then it's got a third button, which is the more button, so you could top off as needed. One of the interesting things about this grinder is that it doesn't set dose via time or weight, it sets it by motor revolution. So we called tech wizard Ari to chat more about this.
We've already got the technology baked in to monitor the position of the motor and hence the burrs. We use that for torque control, but that allows us to have consistent RPM speeds. You know, a typical motor without torque control, the actual speed is going to vary based on the amount of resistance that it has. So we're just fixing in consistency in the actual speed that the burrs spin in. And we found that by using, instead of time, by using revolutions, we get a more consistent output in terms of the dose.
Another interesting thing about the Swan is how you activate the grinder. So instead of using a switch or a button, this basically uses a system where the portafilter completes the circuit to activate the grinder. So these connect to the grinder, and as you can see, the circuit's not completed until you put the portafilter in there, bridging that gap. Some of the most fun features of the Swan are in the usability department. So the hopper is a spill-proof design. It's got this aperture ring on the bottom that fully closes, and you can't take the hopper off unless this is fully closed. So there's no pulling the hopper off and accidentally spilling coffee everywhere. It's just not gonna happen. Now it does take quite a bit of turning to get that ring to fully close, but it's better than making a huge mess everywhere. Hopper lid's pretty cool too. It slides open instead of fully lifting off. So if you're topping off coffee on bar, you don't need to find a place to put this random lid that you're just holding. You just slide the hopper lid open, fill it up with coffee, slide it closed. The grinder's pretty close to being a direct drop. There's no grounds chamber for coffee to get caught up in, but there are a few pieces underneath the grinder. There's this inverted cone that sits on the bottom of the burr set, and then there's a little slide that directs the coffee into the portafilter. This is the first time I've taken this off by myself, so we'll see what happens. 2 little screws, and this slide should come out. Whoa! So you got the slide. Can't get it out. Can I twist it? There you go. Oh, it just comes out. There's always the possibility that some little bit of coffee could get stuck somewhere, but with this system, it'd be really easy to just take a brush, whoosh, wipe it off. There's no secret chamber. So if you make a grind adjustment, you're going to see the impact of that grind adjustment right away. When you make a grind adjustment and there's old coffee that's still in the grinder that's ground on your previous setting, that's one of my pet peeves about dialing in espresso. I just want to see that adjustment right away. So the more grinders that move towards this system, the better. Then you've got the fluff, the anti-static part of this situation. So the old school S grinders, like the prototype I saw in 2008, used a bayonet mount where the portafilter locked into the grinder, much like it would lock into an espresso machine, to kind of mitigate some of the spray from the static that comes with a direct drop setup. This system wasn't perfect. It trapped the mess, but you still had all the static and clumping. So once you took the portafilter out, it just wasn't the best bed of coffee. So what the Swan grinder uses is an ion ring around the burr set that hits the coffee with negative and positively charged ions as it's coming out of the burr set and neutralizes any of the static. This grinder is fluffy. The quality of the grounds is just, it's beautiful. You can even see when you settle it, the coffee just slides over itself and goes where it wants to go. I'm not saying you need to settle it, but if you wanted to, you could, and it looks great. Put my finger in it. The first time I saw this ion technology was last year at SCA. Akaya had it in their booth. They had a little beam that was shooting into the grounds path. I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to be integrated into a lot of grinders in the future. It just makes sense. If you compare coffee that's ground off of this to coffee that's ground off a grinder without any of these ion blasters, it's just a different ballpark altogether.
All right, that is the Swan, and that is the E80. So you can see this is quite a bit fluffier. Again, not making any claims as to what that means, just showing you what I see.
Again, not a review, we're just playing with it, having fun. I just wanted to see the manifestation of this. I'm sure not too many people will remember the original S grinder prototypes, but it's so rad to see that technology has been progressing so much that things that we had ideas for in the past that just weren't possible are now completely doable.
Okay, Strata X. So the Strata X is an evolution of the Strata EP. The EP used individual boilers, gear-driven pumps, and pressure-based profiling, which allowed you to create, record, and play back custom espresso profiles. Pressure-based profiling is a quirky beast. Since pressure and flow are interlinked, any small variation in dose or grind setting can wreak havoc on your profile. The Strata X uses the same individual boiler and pump setup, but integrates mass-based profiling. Essentially, the scale and the pump are talking to each other. By tying the profiling to a target output weight, the profiling is more consistent and isn't affected by changes in your dose or grind setting.
Mass-based profiling is really the shining feature of this machine, and in my mind, it's the thing that takes what the Strata EP was, which I felt was a cool machine that you could have in your lab and tinker with, but pretty just, it's like the Wild West if you want to put it on bar, you know? Unless you're really in tune with everything that's going on, it's probably going to be more weird than it is awesome. And with the mass-based profiling, you could take the Strata X and throw it on bar in a busy cafe and feel confident in the consistent results that it's going to give you.
The X does have a few other notable features. For pre-infusion, it uses a smart saturation that senses back pressure in the group head and makes sure your puck is fully saturated before the pump kicks in. It also shares some DNA with the KB90, like the straight-in portafilter and auto steam flush.
Oh, that was cool.
Okay, to record a profile, we simply go into the menu and set it to manual brewing. And we use the paddle on the group to manually control the pump while we're pulling the shot. Once the shot's done, you then have the option to save that profile to your bank of profiles. You can have different profiles running on different group heads at the same time, lock certain profiles to keep them from being erased, and you can even take a profile and modify it by stretching it out or squishing it to run a set curve shape with different outputs. You can also run the X in straight AV or mass mode if you don't want a pressure profile at all.
So I just talked to Scott at La Marzocco and asked him if the Strata X will have the same app-based connectivity that the Strata EP had. So the EP had an app-based system that allowed you to draw a pressure curve and then upload that curve into the machine. He said that never actually worked exactly how they wanted it to, and because of some quirks and caveats, they're not going to be pursuing that with the X. That being said, I think if they figure out a way to do it well, it would be a really cool system. If I had a bunch of different curves that I knew I wanted to try out, it would be easier to just draw them out and upload them into the machine rather than to try to create each one manually with the paddle group. Obviously, this is something that they've thought of, and it's not as simple as it sounds, so they're shelving it for now, but who knows for the future.
In the time I had with this, I didn't create any mind-bending espresso profiles, and I think a small percentage of shops will actually put in the time to use all of this profiling potential. But that being said, I applaud the spirit of this machine, which taps into the magic of La Marzocco. They consistently do a great job of having one foot planted in history and tradition and the other foot pushing forward into exploration.
I'm gonna do one more of those.
So does everybody need a machine like this? No, it's kind of like a concept car. Let's create the wildest thing we can think of in the spirit of experimentation and progress and see what happens. And some of these concept features might feel like they're over the top, but time and time again, the fringe technologies of today become the industry standards of tomorrow. So even though we don't have any plans to buy a fleet of these and replace all of our espresso machines in our cafe, I see the value in poking around and seeing what's possible. Huge thanks to La Marzocco for their hospitality. They just shared their space. It was so much fun. It's always fun to visit them. Incredible people over there doing incredible things, and that's one of the reasons I can't review any of their machines. It would be completely biased. I just adore them as a company. So mad respect to them. Thank you for your hospitality. Hope y'all enjoyed this. I'll see y'all soon. Peace.
Rains like snow.